Early in the morning, it gets me from my sleep, way before the sunlight makes the sky. Catching a bow on a homemade hopper makes my day complete. Oh, there's magic in the rise, and I'm going fishing in the morning, gotta catch the early light. I'm going fishing for a feeling I get when the fish bite. Oh, I gotta say my prayers, roll down the covers, kiss my wife goodnight. I'm going fishing in the morning, gotta catch the early light. Out on the river in my favorite fishing hole, troubles are cast out with the line, and the fly lands on the water and the fish begin to roll.
Steelhead are among the most revered and elusive game fish on the planet. Few anglers have the faith, persistence, and skill required to pursue them. The effort expended to find these fish directly correlates to the rewards of catching one. Found in some of the most remote and beautiful rivers, you can understand the passion and desire anglers have for these fish. Team Flyboys set out to do what few people have: catch wild steelhead on a dead drift dry fly, and for the first time ever, capture it on film. The team sought out one of the last pure runs of wild steelhead. They traveled from Bozeman, Montana to Smithers, British Columbia to fish a remote stretch of the Skeena River system.
So we went through the border without any problem. Said, how many cases of beer do you have? 4 or 5. He said 4 or 5. And I said 5. It was like 12 packs, 18 packs, 24 packs, 18 packs. And what's the purpose of your trip? Fishing? And then it kind of all made sense to him. Fisherman with beer, and he said, right on through, buddy.
We'll cook them up.
I've pretty much lived in Bozeman all my life, except for one summer that I spent in Moab, Utah, guiding whitewater. And I just fish a lot, you know. I spend a lot of time on the river, so I don't know what else I mean, if I didn't fish, I don't know what the hell I'd do. I wouldn't even leave my house.
gas is getting ridiculous. Our little escapade across the wrong way of the wrong side of the United States has definitely cost my pocketbook a lot of money. And I just pulled into a full-service gas station, started pumping my own gas. I don't think they're very happy about it.
Steelhead anglers around the world share the same passion no matter how or where they fish. To gain a broader perspective, Flyboys invited some legendary figures within the sport to share their knowledge, experience, and concern for wild steelhead.
Well, a steelhead simply is a rainbow trout that goes to the ocean. Fish will seek out an area where they could pick up the most nutrients, and the Pacific Ocean obviously was the place that they can pick up more nutrients.
Where a steelhead is really it's a real true sports fish. It attacks your fly, it wants your fly. It's kind of interesting. People think that steelhead are hard to catch, you know, and I think what's one of the alluring things about steelhead is the not catching them.
You spend a lot of time fishing and not much time catching, and always for me that was kind of the best part of it. And every now and then a fish would come along and interrupt your thoughts. But steelhead are a real elusive fish, and I think that's what has a lot of appeal.
Steelhead are similar to rainbow trout, except for their ability to survive in both fresh and salt water. Wild steelhead once ranged from southern California up the coast to Alaska and across the Bering Sea to the east coast of Russia. These migratory fish, born in a river, enter the Pacific Ocean to feed and mature before running back upstream to spawn in their river of birth.
Well, I started fly fishing when I was probably about 3 or 4 or 5, because my dad fly fished. So as soon as I was able to walk and know what was going on, my dad put a rod in my hand and sent me out. Fly fishing is very important to me. I don't know exactly, it's kind of like saying, what does eating mean to you? Well, kind of keeps you going, you know. I don't know what else I mean, if I didn't fish, I don't know what the hell I'd do. I wouldn't even leave my house, you know. But I know it's always going to be a big part of my life, one way or another, and that's pretty much, I mean, it means the world to me. My most memorable steelhead fishing would be just this last spring in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, catching fish that were right out of the ocean. I mean, when you hooked them, they went. And it's also where I've caught my biggest steelhead and my prettiest steelhead, and also where I had the most fun steelheading. So it was kind of the whole package in one, and that would be my favorite steelheading experience. My fishing partners are certifiably crazy. Jesse'll tell the biggest story, he'll tell the raunchiest story, he'll tell the funniest story, he'll tell the most stories, generally. Fishing with Jesse is like fishing with like Sam Kinison or Keith Richards or Jerry Garcia, just someone who is, like I said, out of his mind. Other than that, I guess, you know. It's just, who doesn't want to make a film about their favorite thing, you know? Fishing, all I've ever done is fish, and I hope that the film is entertaining, but mostly I want people who see it to come away educated. Not only about steelhead, but the importance of conservation and the importance that losing, or the consequences of losing these fish, which is a real possibility with the way human beings treat their rivers and their mountains and everything in between. So I just hope that people, when they see a movie like this, come away with a respect, not only for the fish, but for the environment that the fish live in.
Well, my name is Jess Atkins. I'm actually from Bozeman, Montana. Pretty much born and raised there. I pretty much fish as much as I possibly can. Be it here or there, it's just, you know, river time is what I'm looking for most of my life.
What have you done?
Fly fishing for me means a lot of things. I love fish. I love the take and the attack and the science and everything that really goes into catching and tricking a fish into, you know, land in your hand, essentially. What do I like to do besides fly fish? Oh, I like a lot of stuff. I mean, I like playing music. I like cooking. I like fly fishing. Did I mention that? Really like fly fishing a lot.
How does
Fly fishing, I've always been an outdoor person, you know. My whole life I've grown up in the outdoors, be it rock climbing or whitewater or just hiking or just, you know, in general, preferring to be outdoors and kind of intermingling with nature, you know. And I think fly fishing for me is very much a venue for getting out into those places. But I think this will probably ring true for a lot of people. My most memorable steelhead is most definitely my first one. I spent, 15 years of my life fishing for trout and caught a lot of big trout, but one day I caught something like this and it changed everything. My first steelhead was about 36 inches and it was beautiful. Oh, right. Yeah, I think steelhead and salmon and any of these sea-run fish are, they're more than anything, whether you fish or not, they really truly are a symbol of a clean environment and a clean ecosystem. You start losing your steelhead, you start losing your salmon, really what's next? We see the same thing in Montana with the grayling, areas where there used to be a really thriving grayling population have dwindled down to nothing or next to nothing. And I think it's just a testament to how well we take care of our waters, our fresh waters, which are, more and more precious every day. And the freshwater fish are dwindling.
Steelhead fishing holds a special place in my heart because of the relationship I've developed with that fish over a lifetime of fishing for it. You'll be looking down in these deep pools and they'll just sort of appear like a ghost. This faint gray line will just come into view and then he's gone again. And it's like, where did he go? What happened? You fish and fish and fish and nothing. And then just when you've given up, and you think you're just sort of casting without any thought, and a fish climbs on and you're hooked up. And it's one of those things where you hear people say it's a fish of 1,000 casts. It's they're unbelievable jumpers. They hit the fly so hard. There's all these moments in time that steelhead do these certain things that we can all point out as easy things, but the fish in itself, he or she is just a really sort of magical fish, you know, that I don't think you really can appreciate or really totally understand until you've caught them, until you've seen them in the river, until you've fished for them and tried to catch them. And nobody else has that fly, and nobody else can get that fly. So it's that complete direct connection between the art that I create in the vise, the art of making the right cast and presenting that fly to the fish, and then his acceptance of that pattern and his willingness to come and eat it. Nothing else is like that. There's no other fishing that's like that, period. There just isn't.
Well, my name's Bill Flick. I grew up on the East Coast and was exposed to fly fishing at a rather early age, and that my father had a hunting and fishing lodge, and there was hunting for rough grouse and fly fishing. And he became very well known, far better known than I ever will, for his book on Streamside Guide, which came out in the 40s. And when I had a fly rod in my hand the first time, I have no idea, but I'm sure I wasn't very old. And I remember one thing about the fly fishing. My father was, before he got into fly fishing heavily, he was a fantastic bait fisherman with worms. And then once the transition took place from bait fishing to fly fishing, he was death on bait fishing. And I remember one time I came back, and back in those days, if you caught trout, you very often kept them to eat. It was before catch and release was really in existence. And I remember I was out one time, and I caught a couple trout on a grasshopper. And I told my father, and in the beginning he had a fit, because that was really bait fishing. And then he got thinking about it, and well, maybe it isn't quite bait fishing. So I was able to overcome that. But after that, I didn't use grasshoppers anymore. I used an artificial that might represent something that looked like a grasshopper. But anyway, that's how I got started into fly fishing. One of the ones would have been on the Dean, and Gary King, a friend of mine who now lives in Denton, and I were fishing the Dean up above the canyon, and there was an island, and there was a pool on the other side of the island, small island, and then Gary went downstream out of sight and around the bend, and fortunately, before I just had my knee done, I was a pretty good and reckless wader. And I hooked a steelhead over there, and he ran downstream, ran to around the point, lower point of the island, and down the stream, and I had to cross the stream channel to follow him. And he was going so fast, and I had a lot of backing, because on the Dean you need a lot of backing. And my backing was disappearing fast, and why I didn't get hung up in the rocks, I don't know. I had to absolutely run across that channel and not break my neck, which somehow I didn't. I think I was going so fast that I didn't have time to fall, possibly. He went on downstream, around the bend, down through a pool, and at the tail of the pool, Gary King was fishing. And I yelled at him, and he says, "What in the hell are you doing down here? I thought you were fishing upstream." I said I was, but I didn't have any choice. This fish wanted to come down here, and I think he wants to go to the ocean. But that was a pretty memorable moment.
My name is Bob Clay. I'm a guide on the Kispiox River. I moved here in 1977 after fishing here. I started fishing here in 1971, and I liked it a lot, so I moved here. And a few years later, I got into guiding, and It's been a pretty good way of life for me. And I got interested in rod building a few years later, and now I'm doing a lot of that, and hopefully I'll be doing it full time and sort of maybe fading a little bit on the guiding scene, give the young guys more of a chance to get out there.
And it was the Kissbacks then your first steelhead experience?
Yep, it's where I caught my, like I said, I caught my first steelhead. I think here in 1972, the first trip I came, we came around the bend and it was raining pretty good and the river was out. But we sort of saw the potential of the area and how beautiful it was. So we came back in 1972 and things were right and caught my first steelhead. And it was a pretty neat time.
Can you what was it? What was the fishing like when you caught your first steelhead? What was the crowd like? What was the river like?
There was most of the fishermen back then were gear fishermen. So we tried to emulate those fishermen, I guess, because we didn't really know how to catch steelhead. So we saw the water they were fishing, which was probably about 4 or 5 feet deep and pretty fast. So we got out there with our shooting heads, and we used Cobra on shooting heads, and tried to cast a long way and tried to sink it, you know, as deep as we can. But I remember one day I was out there and I threw my line out there, and as soon as it hit the water, a steelhead took it, and I got, that didn't sink very far. So then we started to explore the other possibilities of fishing for steelhead and finding our own water, basically, that suited our method better than trying to emulate the gear fishermen. We thought that was the only place the steelhead were, is where they were fishing for them, because they were successful.
So when you first started fishing for steelhead, did you really know what you were getting into with this fish as far as what its life cycle was, what its history was, why it was here, what time of year it was here?
I think we knew the basics back then. We knew that the run occurred in the fall because they had to get here to overwinter so they could spawn in the spring, because all steelhead spawn in the spring. And what makes it different up here than, say, closer to the coast is the distance that's involved. So I think we had that kind of idea, but we really didn't know like how long they were in the river for as juveniles before they went to the ocean, how long they spent in the ocean. So all of that stuff we kind of learned as time went by.
Can you tell us what it was like when you caught your first steelhead? What that experience was all about?
Well, I'm sure I'll never forget it, because it was pretty amazing. We really didn't even know, to tell you the truth, what it was. You know, the fish took it and ripped out of there. And until we got it close to hand and saw what it was, we had no idea. And we saw this big fish that looked like a big rainbow, and we were kind of really amazed. We were used to fishing the Bow River, and we catch 5-6 pound rainbows, but catching these 12-pound fish that just were sort of uncontrollable was pretty neat.
My name is Denise Maxwell. We're on the Bulkley River, just upstream of Telkwa, BC. I'm a licensed fishing guide on the river, and I've been fishing this river for over 30 years. Fly fishing was something that I could enjoy with my husband, and it also became an opportunity to travel, an excuse to travel to different places. You'd take a trip, a vacation, you'd go somewhere fly fishing. We went to South America, we went to Florida. It's a great vacation, an excuse to go somewhere and fish. And you meet wonderful people too.
What does fly fishing mean to you today?
Fly fishing is something that I really enjoy. All of my friends fly fish, or most of my friends fly fish. I'm involved with the Federation of Fly Fishers, the casting instructor program. So I do a lot of teaching, always have done a lot of teaching of fly casting. It's a way I make a living. I guide people, but you also instruct people when you take them out fishing. And it's just a way of life. My most memorable, I've had so many memorable ones.
Can you give us more than one?
Probably on the Kispiox, I caught a very big steelhead. It was 37 inches long and it had a 27-inch girth. So it looked like a little pig, it was so fat. So that's one of the most memorable ones. Some of the other ones have to do with people I've guided on the Bulkley here. We had a lady come from England, Anne Vosbark, who runs a fishing lodge, or did run a fishing lodge in Devon. And she brought her husband and we were fishing. And we wanted to get her a fish. So she managed to hook a fish just downstream of here. And I was standing beside her. I literally picked her up, a little woman. And it ended up that there were two of us, and we walked her, helped her fight the fish, and walked her into shore. It was a huge fish, too. And I think she was in a state of shock. I don't think she even realized we were there. But that was one of the memorable ones. I can't remember the size.
Okay, my name is Jerry Custich. I live in Twin Bridges, Montana, where at present I am co-owner with Glenn Brack and Jeff Walker of Sweetgrass Fly Rod Company, where we hope to be continuing on our tradition that we established at Winston Rods of building fine bamboo rods.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with steelhead fishing.
My background is in the late 60s. I came out west to teach high school in Utah from western New York, where I grew up, and decided that I really liked the West, and saw the opportunity to expand my fishing interests, which had been cultivated in the Great Lakes when I was a kid, but the Great Lakes were dead. And I was actually surprised to find water that had living fish in it, and it intrigued me. So after a short stint of teaching high school, I decided at one point that I wanted to go fishing for the rest of my life, and I feel I'm one guy who has accomplished his goal. Yeah, first steelhead I caught on the Salmon River, I remember distinctly. It was one of those timeless moments of most perfect run you could imagine. Nice gradual sweep into a tail out, and swinging my greenbutt skunk. The fish took, and I had never, that was the biggest fish I had hooked on a fly rod, and I had 7 weight. I can remember the tone of the day. It was a fall with the yellows on the cottonwoods, the lighting, which is that low shadow lighting of the fall. Just anything you could possibly imagine what catching a steelhead would be on a perfect day, that was it. And when I finally got it into shoreline and just looked at it, it was the most beautiful creature I think I'd ever seen. Just a blush on its gill, on her gills, just the faintest stripe starting to form. But it was for an upper Salmon River fish. It was almost a chromer, and that was a fish that had already swum about, I think 800 miles at that point. It's just a magnificent fish.
My name is Keith Stonebreaker, and I was born in the Clearwater Valley, raised here, and spent my whole life in this region.
How or why or when did you start fly fishing this drainage?
Just about 1960. I tried my hand at it, I think in 58 and 59, but it wasn't until 60 that I hooked my first steelhead on the Clearwater.
Was that with a fly or?
On a fly. Right.
Was there anybody that was instrumental in making that happen for you, or was this something you discovered on your own?
Well, I was watching these about 8 guys that would come up from California. I think 5 of them worked for the Disney studios as animators and songwriters and various and filmmakers, and they came up here for whatever reason. They discovered the river on their way to Canada, and they didn't go to Canada after that. It was amazing. And they were fly fishing this stream back in the 50s.
Can you mention their names and what were they previously steelhead fishermen before they came here?
Oh yes, yes. They, I think they cut their teeth on some of the Northern California steelhead rivers and on the Umpqua River in Oregon. And let's see if I can remember some of their names right now. I'll just have to go back and search that in my mind. But wonderful guys, very open with suggestions and how to do it, and they were having amazing results catching those wild bee fish in the Clearwater on flies. Just incredible.
Why is fly fishing for steelhead so special to you?
Well, I think one of the reasons I love steelhead fly fishing is because I don't have to, well, for one thing, aside from the aesthetics, it used to be I didn't have to travel very far to be able to catch one of the greatest game fish on earth. I mean, it was in right out my back door, and that's pretty special. Yeah, I got one that, you know, using the traditional length and girth squared method.
How does that work?
Well, length times girth squared divided by 800, which is the formula for the weight of water. And that on any fish on earth, that should give you a pretty close, real close estimate on how much that fish weighs. And figuring that, I got one about 22 and a half.
Well, I've been interested in fishing since I was a kid. Grew up in the Midwest, and my uncles got me going on a river on the farm in North Dakota. And a friend of mine, when I was doing an archaeological project in Umatilla, was a North Umpqua steelhead bum, and he kind of got me interested in that. So he gave me lessons in fly casting and so forth, and we came to the river. My position here with the North Umpqua Foundation is as a poacher deterrent on a pool on Steamboat Creek. Steamboat Creek has been closed to angling since 1932, and there unfortunately are some cold streams that enter the Steamboat Creek that create cold pools, and these gather steelhead. And because there's a 2-lane road along Steamboat Creek, there's been ready access for people that can justify to themselves poaching, going to and from these pools and taking steelhead out illegally. The pool I mainly sit at, what I call Big Bend Pool, holds hundreds of wild steelhead, and it used to get dynamited regularly. Like, as near as I can tell from accounts that people have told me, potentially 2 to 3 times a year. And you know, it's basically to deter that sort of activity that I sit up on that particular pool.
So, and last question, is there any fond memories that you have in fishing the steelhead?
Fond memories.
Or any personal?
Yes. Actually, one of my fondest memories of steelheading with flies, which is how I started steelheading, is that it took me 7 years to catch my first steelhead on the North Umpqua, and I'm delighted with that.
Is that true?
Yes.
Wow.
Of course, I was learning to fly fish and all sorts of other things, but If I'd gone right in and started catching fish, I question whether it would have captured my fancy the way it had.
And so by having it be such a challenge, I mean, what do you think it's personally given you?
It's given me an appreciation for things besides hooking steelhead, the process.
Right.
I think casting, paying attention to the water, reading the water, enjoying a conversation with a fellow angler, noticing the dippers or the kingfishers, noticing the dead salmon, just paying attention to the world around me without being so absolutely focused on the one nitty-gritty issue, which is hooking one of these goddamn fish.
I'm Russ Chatham, and I live in Livingston, Montana, and I am a painter, and I'm also a writer, and I publish a few books. I have a small publishing company. I also do a great deal of lithography. I started when I was pretty young because I was born in San Francisco and moved across the bay to Marin County when I was 9, maybe 10 years old. And that's what we had. I mean, steelhead was the fish, all the creeks and so forth. And we also had a cabin, my family had a cabin up on the Russian River, and that's what you had there too. I mean, we had bass and things in the summer, but it was the steelhead that was, you know, what we really wanted to catch. And so the very first fishing outfit I ever had was a steelhead fly fishing outfit. And we went over, my uncle took us over to the Golden Gate Angling and Casting Club, and there were guys there that showed us how to use the shooting heads, which was a pretty new thing. You know, it had only been a few years since that had even been designed or discovered. And so we had, I mean, I think the key to it was we had all the fishing you could want right within minutes of the house. You didn't have to drive, you know, to the Eel River. You didn't have to drive to the Russian River. You could just, or in my case, I could ride my bike to the creeks by my house that were full of steelhead. One day, I can't even tell you what the date of this would be, but it would probably be in the late 50s, because I was pretty young. So let's just say it was in 1957 or 8, maybe. And I found out from the game warden in Marin County that Paper Mill Creek, the lower part of Paper Mill Creek, was considered to be part of Tomales Bay. So when the steelhead fishing season closed at the end of February, which it did all up and down the coast, that was when it closed, the only river you could fish was the Russian because it was open all year. And so what we did was we fished for downstreamer steelhead, and just for fun, and nobody ever, it was just fly fishermen, and nobody ever killed them. We just were fishing and so forth. But I figured that there would be downstreamer steelhead in Paper Mill too, you know. So so I went out there a few times and I caught a few, and you know, it was one of those things where I was really secretive about it because I didn't want anybody to see me with a fishing rod, or, you know, I didn't want any other guys to get the idea that there could be anything going on out there. So I showed up there one day about 2 in the afternoon, and I looked, I climbed up the hill, I had a place in the bushes to hide my car, and I had to climb up a little bit so I could look out there, and there's a guy standing in the hole that I wanted to fish. And I'm just like dumbfounded. How could this possibly be, you know? So I hung around for about, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes later, I see him walking away, and he walks up and he disappears, and I'm thinking, God, I don't know who it is, I don't know, you know, and I'm all agitated because there's a guy, somebody else figured this out. So, but I thought, so I jumped the fence and I walk over there, and it's calm. It's kind of cloudy, calm March afternoon. It was. I used to know the date. I probably have it written down somewhere. And I thought, well, you know, we'll see. So I make a few casts, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a little disturbance way in the top end of the hole, and I go, oh. So I walked around, and this hole was about, the hole itself was about, I'd say 200 feet long, and an incoming bank and a cut, and then the hole, it came around, and then it went around and it out into another hole. It was where the bank was on my side. So I went up there, and as I was looking at the water, I see this fish roll. So I throw a cast right, the water's moving slow, the tide's almost out, and it's just moving about like this. I throw it over here, and boom, and I got this fish. And so I play it and bring it in, and it's a spent steelhead, and it's like 6 pounds, or give or take. And so that's great, you know. So I think, I wonder if there's another one there. I cast out again, a couple of casts, boom, I got another one. So I get that in, same size fish. And then nothing for a little bit, and then I see another fish. I just saw like just barely a movement, a little tail or something. I throw over there, and I catch another fish. I'm thinking, holy man, this is what's that other guy doing? You know, were they not biting? Well, they weren't there. They were coming down. They had just slid from White House Pool. They were just sliding back into this tidewater transition pool. And I fished there. They kept moving down, and as I'd see them, and I kept moving down, and I kept catching them. And they got down, when we got to the end of the pool, I'd caught 22 steelhead, all identical in size, all on the same fly. And I was getting ready to go, and then I saw down on the other bank, which I knew was a salmon hole I like to fish. I see a fish roll down there, and I got out. I had to duck through this cut up to here in the waders, and ran down there and threw out where I saw that one. I got the 23rd one. Not a bad afternoon.
Well, probably something I'll remember until I'm gone was hooking a fish at a certain place on the Umpqua, and having the fish tear around the pool, well into the backing, but stayed in the pool. I was maybe waist deep on a little ledge, and the fish came out right in front of me and did a cartwheel and spit the fly. And a little bit more than a rod length away, a little bit more than 10 feet away. And it was a pretty astounding thing. I mean, I've caught fish that have cleaned me out right to the end of the arbor. But that one fish will stay with me until I leave the planet. There's others that are pretty remarkable things. I've had lots of them eat dry flies. I've stood on rocks and watched lots of them suck a nymph in and put the steel to them. That's another hard thing to qualify. Because I've been really pretty fortunate to have shots at a lot of those fish, and had seen some pretty neat things happen. You know, fish jumping in little coastal streams and throwing water on both banks when they'd hit. You know, racing through bushes, falling down. And some of those things you see when a fish comes into the air, pretty far out, looking like missiles coming out of the ocean.
Tell us a little bit about the first or the biggest steelhead you ever caught.
First one I caught was on the eel, and I was probably too dumb to really recognize what a wonderful event that was. Pretty sure I was too dumb. And yeah, no, the biggest one I've ever landed has been on the Thompson. I've hooked others that were pretty big fish, but It's kind of the luck of the draw. It's kind of in steelhead fishing. It really is, unless it's someplace like the Umpqua, or if the water is right on the Kispiox and maybe the Maurice to actually see and target a fish. I just don't like blind fishing. I've done millions of blind casts to those things, not thousands, and I'd much prefer to see one and drive the bug right to it. You either have to move out of the way or eat the fly. To me, that's the piece de resistance. And I've watched a lot of them eat the fly. I guess, Paul, one of the most insightful things to me is being up in a tree with somebody on the water casting. I mean, I've seen fish do things that are just absolutely mind-boggling. Eat a fly, spit it out, eat it again, spit it out. 3 times is the most I've seen that happen, with the fish turning as the fly is going downstream, and the chap holding onto the rod can't understand why I'm screaming strike at him, because he doesn't feel a thing, and not tight enough, or that little pull like on your shirt collar. I just don't get it. And they're looking for this yank, which so many steelhead fishermen seem to be hardwired for. That the fish is going to come over, grab the fly, and go back over to its holding line. And quite often they turn downstream with it, and they're going to spin around with it, but they're going, ugh, pooey. And you see that. You're up there on a tree or up on a high bank, watching it. It's pretty interesting. It makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck when you think about how many fish you missed. That you knew that was, God,